Welcome along to Susty Talk, Edie's new series of video interviews put together to keep our audience of sustainability and energy professionals talking, feeling connected and optimistic through this period of lockdown here in the UK and beyond. I'm Edie's content editor Matt Mace, and this is being broadcast on Friday the 22nd of May, which is otherwise known as World Biodiversity Day. So to mark that occasion, joining me for this episode of Susty Talk, we have Eric Soubeiran, Danone's VP for Nature and Water Cycle, and also the CEO of Danone's Ecosystem Fund. So Eric, thank you so much for joining me today. Whereabouts are you connecting from?
I'm connecting from Paris, where I'm living actually. So very happy to connect indeed. Thank you for the invitation.
Great. No, thank you for taking time out of your schedule to talk to us. And how has life been in Paris during lockdown then? How have you been able to kind of focus on work, or has kind of the pandemic pushed what you usually focus on to the side a little bit?
Well, I think it's been a very, very hectic and busy period because, of course, Danone being a food company, we already at the core of our preoccupation to make sure we can ensure business continuity to deliver food wherever we were operating, and we had to overcome a lot of logistic challenge, but also distribution challenge, and I think the teams have been doing an incredible work across the globe, and I would say at the core of this dimension is really the relationship with our ecosystem that I think we're going to be able maybe to discuss a little bit further. And in my second hat, over and above being the CSO for Danone, I'm also in charge of the Danone Ecosystem Fund, with an impact investment fund that was created in 1998 during the financial crisis to ensure we anchor the most vulnerable people in our supply chain. So you can imagine that in this moment, there was a lot of activity, of course, first to protect the projects in which we are investing in waste pickers, in smallholder farmers, in also micro distribution or healthcare giver across the globe, and this has been quite a busy time for me, but very meaningful, and I'm very grateful to be part of the organization where I am, because I think in this very period of time we see that the essentiality of food is and our food supply chain is very critical. And that's really why I joined Danone 10 years ago now, and it's very clear in this moment in time. And on the personal side, living in Paris is okay. I mean, we are going through a small and progressive deconfinement now, which I think is giving hope to many people. But I think this momentum will last. And this will definitely impact the habits of people. So we are learning to live with the COVID, which I think is something that is by definition new, and will take time for the whole society to adjust. So we are all a little bit refining our ways of, I would say, interacting, working, operating, and that's quite new.
Yeah, I think France and Paris have probably had much more kind of stricter lockdown than in the UK. So I always feel a bit bad for moaning, but in comparison, we've had some really free freedom. So it's glad to hear that you're kind of coming out the other side of all that. And obviously we're quite aware of Danone. They're kind of a sustainability leader in that sense. But your job title, kind of VP for Nature and Water Cycle, and obviously the Ecosystem Fund, which you kind of head up as well. Those are quite interesting aspects of sustainability. So how do you sit within the organization? Do you have much interaction with this wider sustainability team? Do you sit in it? How does that relationship work?
Well, actually VP Nature and Water Cycle for Danone is a translation of Chief Sustainability Officer, if I'm very clear. So concretely, my team is the sustainability team that is defining the framework for action within the company, and also reporting on our performance when it comes to extra financial environmental performance. And this is basically what I do as a living. And my team is connected at corporate level with the different sustainability leaders of our business units, but also of our procurement functions, because I think that's something that is very important for a food company. The way you procure your food and your ingredients is basically determining your environmental footprint. So I have a double hat. I am sitting at the corporate level really to perform that job, but I am also sitting at the cycles and procurement board, where basically my colleagues, who are the vice president in charge of milk supply, of ingredient supply, of raw materials, etc., or packaging supply, are sitting with me, which is for me a very good way to anchor basically our planet agenda into the operation of the company. So that's basically how I work. So when food at corporate level, when food really anchored into the business through the procurement and through our sustainability leaders in the different business units.
Okay, great to know. And you mentioned a lot of different departments there that you have touch points with, which is great to see. Probably showcases how embedded sustainability is there at Danone. How has it been like interacting with different parts of the business and your own team during lockdown? Was it quite a digital setup already, or has this been a bit of a learning curve for you?
Well, I think during the lockdown, of course, I think I was quite impressed by the capacity of the teams to adapt to the digital setup. I think, of course, there have been a bit of adjustment needed. I think that's very clear. But we've been able to complete, for instance, our cycle of reporting when it comes to environmental reporting. We've been able to continue, basically, of course, to develop a few very important milestones for the company, where we announced this morning, for instance, that Danone will be becoming, if our General Assembly validate that on 26th of June, the first purpose-driven company, entreprise à mission, in the CAC 40, which is a huge transformation. So yes, we are continuing to interact. We're learning these new tools. R&D is key in this crisis, because we see how much our ecosystem, natural ecosystem, is connected to health and also to the inclusivity of people. And that's been basically the mission of Danone, One Planet, One Health, is to connect both. And that's now taking a very tangible, I would say, aspect for our business, but also outside. So I think that's what is very interesting in this period, is we really see the interconnectedness between our business and the mission of the company. So it is very tangible now.
Yeah, and I think now is a great time, not just because it's World Biodiversity Day, but also because of the pandemic itself. I mean, there's some research that kind of suggests that deforestation alone is linked to around, well, almost a third of outbreaks such as Ebola, Zika virus, and Nipah virus as well. So there's been that trend there, the kind of closeness of humanity and the kind of animal wildlife as a result of urbanization has also kind of driven those type of diseases as well. And I think I think there's a kind of consensus that that's kind of how this pandemic was caused, other than the more perhaps out there theories, which we don't necessarily need to touch upon today. But it's clear that biodiversity has a role in terms of human health around the pandemics. So do you think this is going to be a real area of focus, not just at a business level, but probably at a political level, coming out of the pandemic as we kind of enter this new normal?
Well, I think the very specific link between COVID and I would say the biodiversity right now is still being studied. But you are perfectly right that most of the immune I would say I have is 65% in mind are coming from either directly or indirectly from the destruction of ecosystem. And indeed, the fact that basically the different species are directly interacting with each other without the corridors of biodiversity that we're creating, this self-operating space is creating this issue. And you're absolutely right. This has been proven for SRAS. This has been proven for Ebola, for instance. So I think what strikes me in this period is that I think we realize collectively this interconnection, that basically nature is symbiotic by essence. And maybe we forgot it. We forgot it thinking that nature was linear, that we could use it, overuse it without any impact. No, it's a balance. It's an equilibrium that we have to find. And that's basically what is at the very heart of what biodiversity means. Biodiversity is our lifeline. It's basically how you protect life on Earth. That's biodiversity. And that's about this symbiosis, this balance that needs to be found. And we have reached a point where right now we are not protecting biodiversity, we're destroying it, to a point where some scientific studies that I like shows how basically the DNA, the overall DNA of the world is converging now. Why? The very essence of nature is to make it diverge. It's diversity. And I think so we are basically impoverishing basically our lifeline, and that's really what is striking today. And when I translate that to business, I think especially in food, it is very concrete, because it's about the choice of the food system we want to have. Do we want to have a food system that is hyper specialized, where half a dozen of animal species and plant bases represent more than 80% of what people eat, which is creating a massive collective issue? Because if tomorrow you have the same type of virus that is causing issues on oat or one of the cereals, that may be a massive collective issue, for instance. So that's one area. There is a kind of capacity of license to operate in our own life space. And there is a second element that is, I think, very important for the business, is that by definition, biodiversity is about diversity. And I think in food, biodiversity is about taste. It's about more choice for the people. So there is also something where you can have really a win-win scenario, where you can develop new offers that attracts basically consumers, that make them testing new products. And that's really what we believe in Danone. This is why, for instance, last year, at the invitation of the President of the United Nations, we have created a collective action called One Planet Business for Biodiversity, which is basically a collection of 21 multinationals that decided basically to join forces to work on three pillars together, three pillars of actions. One is how to promote a new model of agriculture that we call regenerative agriculture. The second is how we use basically our product portfolio to foster biodiversity. And that's the second. And the third one, which is to fight against deforestation, to protect sensitive ecosystem. So that's the three pillars on which we are working. And our ambition is really to determine this framework of action and create a collective momentum and collective actions on the ground to create this transformation. So that's really our thinking today. And again, this is extremely relevant when it comes to a food company, because I think that's one of the rare agenda in sustainability where it's about more. And I think that's great, that's positive. And we need also, to your point, to leverage also the positive side, what a sustainable world can bring. And that's something I'm working a lot with my teams, is basically how you make a sustainable future unviable. And that's very important to be able to drive this I would say society where people want basically to live in. And biodiversity is one key element, because it's about more choice, more taste, more differentiation, a respect of local practices. So there is a lot of very interesting ideas behind.
That's a really good point. And you mentioned a few topics there, which we covered on quite a bit. Deforestation, regenerative agriculture, and rewilding in particular. And I think, and maybe this is just me not being too kind of knowledgeable on the subject, but I think there was always, up until recently, a perception that the biodiversity aspect of a business's sustainability strategy was a bit of a kind of nice to have, a bit more, I suppose, fluffy in the CSR aspect, rather than kind of ambitious decarbonisation plans. But we've seen actually that biodiversity has a massive impact on the wider climate crisis, and in the UK's own net zero strategy, and obviously the EU has its carbon neutrality target for 2050 as well. Both very much heavily rely on biodiversity being a key driver, not just in terms of rewilding, but to kind of sequester some of the carbon already in the atmosphere. So I'm guessing that's a big focus of that for Danone. Where do you see biodiversity sitting in this kind of carbon neutral transition that some major economies are now embarking on?
Well, I think first of all, biodiversity is of course by definition multifunctional, right? So that's what makes this topic a bit complex. So either we take it as a very complex topic, you know, and then we and I agree that I think your comment at the beginning is right, or you try really to anchor it into transformation that are I would say purpose-driven and making sense. So this is a bit the translation we made from P2B from, I would say, biodiversity as an issue from three pillars that are very concrete, which is how do I restore soil health? Because if I restore soil health, I restore biodiversity in the soil, bringing back carbon matter. How do I use more diversity in my product portfolio, which is in my perimeter of action? You know, I can decide to use one type of strawberry, or I can decide to use more types of strawberry and grow them differently, right? And to the point of how do we collectively, with these 21 companies, look at areas where we are purchasing, sourcing materials in sensitive ecosystem and see if we can have integrated landscape approach locally that are relevant and where we can act together. So that's I think the biodiversity topic is a topic that you can make tangible only through actions, you know. So that's a little bit the complexity, but where I believe it's an interesting topic again. It's because it's a topic that will directly connect with your supply chains, with what you purchase, you know, and I would say the quality and the provenance of your ingredients. And so there is something that is very strong to connect with citizens, maybe in an indirect way, but in a meaningful way, you know. So I hope I'm not too theoretical, because I think you need to maybe accept that this collectively that we will have a series of actions to I would say protect biodiversity. Then the link with climate, I think for me is again quite direct, in a sense that if you look at the 24% of emissions that are linked to agriculture, the emissions or indirect emissions linked to deforestation, these are connected to biodiversity directly. And I think one of the challenges we will have, especially in the COP26 in the UK, is really to think of the climate challenge as a way to get traction on the different action pillars that can drive to a decarbonization. So it's not only CO2 in the atmosphere, it's how you change your agriculture system. You know, for instance, when I take this part of the emission, which is the second largest emission, and then you will protect biodiversity. If you take another example that I like very much, with our wetlands, for instance, we have in Danone we have had a partnership for the last 20 years with the Ramsar Convention for wetlands. It was 20 years ago a very innovative partnership. The first time, one of the first time a private company had a partnership with the UN Convention. Now it's relatively less. I would say it's more common, and it's good, by the way, that it's less common. It's more common, sorry. But if you look at wetlands, wetlands are an ecosystem by itself. When you protect wetlands, this is 5% of the carbon sequestration in the world. But you also protect birds, you protect water, and by the way, you protect drinking water, which is a very important resource. And so I think that's for me what is important in the biodiversity topic, is to de-average the conversation today. And that's, for instance, the position we are taking, especially with the CBD, the COP biodiversity, to make it actionable by the private sector. And this is why I'm taking all these examples, because and to accept that we need to leapfrog the debate that maybe we don't have all the KPIs, maybe we don't have all the metrics, But what is important is we know what are the actions that goes in the right direction, and really form this community of action. So that's the way I see it.
That's a very good point. And yeah, the CBD conference obviously been disrupted by the pandemic, but that was kind of shaping up to be almost like the Paris Agreement of biodiversity. So I think it was very much proof that this is definitely rising up the political agenda as well. I'm not quite sure whether that's been reconfirmed. I know it's just been postponed, but I don't know if they confirmed the new date yet. But I imagine that's on your horizon. But what else in terms of for the rest of the year are you kind of focusing on at the moment?
Yes, I think for us, I mean, I think in Danone, first of all, we announced just today that Danone is going to propose to its General Assembly to become a société à mission. So that's mean that in our bylaws, in the bylaws of the company, a little bit, it's not exactly the same, but a little bit like a benefit corporation in the US, the protection of environment, inclusivity, and also health will be part basically of our company objective. So this is going, of course, to drive a very big dynamic. Another thing that is very strong for us is we announced during our year-end results a very massive investment plan of about 2 billion euros of transformation to accelerate our agenda towards carbon neutrality. And we also, at the same time, decided to communicate with our investors on an EPS post-carbon, which means that we're going to report regularly how the company, taking into account the cost of the externalities linked to carbon, is able to create value. And so that are two important milestones as Danone. So because behind that, you can imagine in a company like us, you have a lot of action plans and a lot of teams working on it. What I'm working also very much is how to anchor that into our brand's communication with our marketing team. That's something that is very important because that's also how we reach out to consumers and citizens. So that's really a second step. And in a more broader agenda, I think on an international base, so we are very active right now in the One Planet business for Biodiversity Coalition. The COP26 will be extremely important. We want to be very active to make it a success because we need this to be a success for business. There are very important questions that need to be addressed, like, for instance, the Article 6 renegotiation. That is very important to give a framework for private companies to manage their agenda. We are also very heavily involved into the science-based target exercise so that there is quite quickly a framework that is compatible for food companies, addressing the issue of carbon sequestration in the soil for the scope 3. So that's a few of the priorities we are working on right now, and at the same time, of course, making sure we are transforming our supply chain to basically deliver on our targets. So that's basically what we do.
not much then, not much on the horizon. Yeah. Sense. That sounds incredibly busy right now. I suppose that's the beauty of being a sustainability professional, is it's such a broad area of action that there's always a lot to do. Eric, thank you so much for being a great guest on this new series. I think you quite succinctly explained the complexity of biodiversity, but also the importance of it to business and nations alike. And it sounds like it's extremely busy at Danone right now. So I do appreciate you taking the time to come speak to me.
My pleasure. Thank you very much. And it's very good that you keep the positive spirit for the sustainability community. I think we need to have a sustainability community that helps the business to transform. What you're doing is exactly in that spirit. I think businesses can be part of the solution, and that's what a sustainability community that you are basically, I would say, animating in a French acronym is really all about. And thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, and for the kind words there, and to everyone that has been watching. Susty Talks a continuous series. It doesn't look like it's going away anywhere as we all continue to work from home. So do look out for the next episode of that. And in the meantime, stay safe, stay positive, and keep up the Susty Talk.